Well, I want to welcome everybody out. My name is Rob Bagley. I'm the Director of Career and Internship Services, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We've got an action-packed week with a great lineup of speakers. As you know, today we'll be hearing from Richard Carruth. Richard was born and raised in Orem, Utah, attended Brigham Young University, graduated from the University of Utah in finance, and later received an MBA from the University of Houston. He worked as an executive at Shell Oil for 36 years in financial management and major business segments worldwide. So has got a unique perspective of being on a major, in leadership in a major corporation. So we look forward to hearing from Elder Carruth today, and we'll turn the time over to him.
Great. Thanks, Rob. No, it's a real pleasure for me to join you today. I'm actually in some ways closer than you think. Unlike your other speakers this week, I look at a career in the rearview mirror. I actually am retired from Shell. I actually work for somebody else now. I'm a senior missionary. This is our third mission, and we're assigned Ensign College. So I'm actually designing courses for the new bachelor's degree in business management. And I'm doing some courses right now for Brent Andrus in small business and entrepreneurship. And so hopefully I'll leave a few footprints around after I'm gone in a few months that might be helpful. But this is one of those opportunities that came to me. I wasn't seeking it. A guy called me one day and asked if I'd be willing to kind of chat with some student groups. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to share. Let me just talk a little bit about background. As Rob said, I was actually born in Ogden, moved to Orem when I was young, and I grew up at Orem, graduated from Orem High School about 51 years ago. So one of the things I'll hopefully help you a little bit is you're looking at a career from the front end. I've seen a career all the way through, and I've looked at it at the back end. And hopefully I can share some things to kind of put careers into perspective. So let me just start and kind of mention the word career is really interesting. Sometimes people will say, what does career mean versus job? A job is something you do just to make money. A career is something you do to actually provide for progression in your future. And if you look at definitions of career actually can apply to more than professional activities. Career can actually apply to your life in total. And so regardless of what you want to do in life, hopefully you're thinking about career in the sense that it's something that you're engaged in that you want to progress. Okay? So obviously you're all interested in careers, that's why you're here. And what I want to do today is I really want to focus on giving you what you want to get out of this. I mean, I can tell war stories for hours about my career, the places I've been, the things I've done, the people I've met. I also prepared some things to share with you maybe a little later on about what I have found to be really important things if you want to be successful in your career, things that you want to do. And what's interesting about that is those things come from a spiritual realm. They have been tested and are taught in the business world by top academics. And I want you to understand the kind of things that the Lord will teach you that will actually make you very successful in your career. So let me kind of start with that. Feel free to put questions into the chat, because I do want to address questions. That's my major focus. Conversely, if you want to go off mute and chat out a question, feel free. Because like I said, at the end of this time, what I really want to have happen is I want you to walk away saying, I got my questions answered. I got the insight that I wanted to get. And that'll feel like we've been successful. Okay? While we're kind of waiting for that, let me just kind of do a quick introduction about my employer. Okay, let's find the right button here. to go into slideshow. There we go. Okay, so I spent 36 years working for an organization called Royal Dutch Shell. And a lot of people kind of say, well, have I ever heard of that company? Well, normally it's just known as Shell. You'll notice the trademark symbol up on the top there on the top left-hand side. That is one of the most recognized brands in the world, as done by various brand commentators. So I worked for a company called Shell. Shell is a British-Dutch multinational oil and gas company that was first formed in 1907. So I'm an American who worked for a European oil company that is the fifth largest company in the world. And so consequently, I had some really, really interesting experiences. As Rob kind of mentioned, let me back up a little bit. When I was 19, it was during the Vietnam War, and very few young people got to go on missions. And I remember getting a phone call at work one night, about 9 o'clock at night, and my bishop said, I and the stake president need to talk to you tonight because we've got to get your papers in tomorrow or we miss this window for you to serve a mission. So I hurried over to my bishop's house, got there probably about 9:30, had an interview. 10 o'clock, I met my stake president. My stake president told me that he would take my papers to Salt Lake the next morning, first thing. I said, great. Friday, I came home from school, Friday afternoon, went to the mailbox, and the first letter I found was from the draft board. And I don't even know if you know what a draft board is, but during war, the draft board decides who goes in the military and who doesn't. And so the first envelope I reached and pulled out of the mailbox was from the draft board. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've been drafted. And I ripped it open and it said, you've been deferred for religious service. This is 2 days after my paperwork went in. The next envelope I saw was from Salt Lake City. Unlike what we do today, including with my children, I ripped it open, read the letter, and found out I was going to Japan. Okay? Unlike my children, I didn't get my patriarchal blessing until about a week before I went on my mission. I called the patriarch up and said, I need to get patriarchal blessing. I'm leaving to go on a mission. And he said, well, how about 3 weeks? I said, no, you don't understand. I'm leaving town next week. So he invited me to come to his house that Sunday, which I did. He put his hands on my head, and I normally don't share this very often, but he told me that I had made promises with my Heavenly Father before I left the spirit world as to what I would do while I was here. He then told me in the blessing that my role for the Lord was to serve in foreign lands and diverse places. So I went on a mission to Japan. I came home and thought, I'm done. I've been to a foreign place and it's really diverse. But that didn't stop there. So a little later, I'm at BYU. And I should tell you this, just to put this in perspective, I'm nobody special. Okay? If you looked at my high school academic record, you'd kind of say, this guy's okay. He does okay, but there's nothing special about him. I mean, I wasn't on sports teams. I wasn't anything. I wasn't a school officer. I basically worked and went to school because I came from a lower middle class family. And if I wanted money, I had to earn it. Well, somehow BYU let me in, and probably because my dad worked there. But when you work for BYU, what my dad did, you don't make a lot of money. But there were some perks. I got a 50% discount on tuition, and I got a parking sticker that put me right next to the buildings. I got a faculty staff parking sticker, okay? Well, My first year, I had a under 2.0 GPA. They call that academic probation. I went on my mission. My mission really helped me a lot because it really kind of got me into what I really wanted to achieve in life. When I came back, I did really well when I came back. I met my wife. So I'm a sophomore at BYU. The Spirit says, transfer to the U. So I did. I gave up my tuition discount. I paid twice as much to go to the U as I paid to go to BYU. I didn't have a parking sticker at all because I lived close enough I could walk as close as the parking lots were that I could get. I married that summer when I started school at the U. 9 months later, my wife and I had a child. I prayed to the Lord and said, what do you want me to do? He said, get another job. Well, guess what? I found the highest paying job I could find was a custodial job. So I was a custodian my senior year. But one day, as I was sitting at my house just getting ready to go to work, I got a phone call from the Career Center. And they called and said, we've just had a cancellation with somebody to talk to Shell. Are you interested? And I said, I don't know who Shell is. They said, are you interested? I said, sure, why not? So I ran over to the Career Center, picked up the literature, read about it. Next day, I showed up, had an interview. I remember when I walked in the door, I looked through the material. I'm a finance major, but they had a lot more interesting things than finance, I thought. And I talked to the recruiter, and the recruiter said, well, did you look at our material? What do you think? And I said, well, actually, I'd like to be in your trading organization where you trade oil and gas and chemicals all over the world. That sounds pretty exciting. And he said, no, I've looked at your paperwork. You should work in finance. So I had an interview. A week later, I got a phone call. I flew to Houston, Texas, had an interview there for a day. That was only the second time in my life I've flown commercial, going to my mission and back, and then my interview in Houston. I got a letter a week later saying, we offer you a job. Before Christmas, I had a job. At that time, Shell was owned by Royal Dutch, but it had minority shareholders in the U.S., so it operated as a U.S. company. So I thought I was going to work for a U.S. company. I had no idea who really I was working for. And that's kind of where my Shell career started. What I learned is in the early parts of my career, I thought a lot about career. I did a lot of planning, where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. I mean, this was a huge company. They had jobs all over the place. But at that time, we were kind of limited. We didn't leave the U.S. And so I just kind of looked within the U.S. for jobs. And what I started to find out is that the Lord was managing my career. And when people ask me today, well, why did you go to work for Shell Oil? The answer I tell them is, I worked for Shell Oil because Shell Oil could get me where the Lord wanted me to be when he wanted me to be there. So after having started work for Shell, I actually started in California. I went to Houston after 2 years. I've subsequently lived in Houston 6 times. I've lived in California twice. I've lived in 5 foreign countries. One of the nice things about living overseas is a lot of times when you live overseas, if you live in an area office, you get to know a lot of general authorities, including apostles, members of the First Quorum of the 70. So I had a number of them talk to me and say, and my nickname is Rick. Rick, you think you're here for your career, but you're not. You're here because the Lord wants you to be here at this time. Your job is to find out why he wants you there and to do it. He will manage your career. Don't worry about it. Okay? And he did. And that's why I've moved all over the world. And most of the times I've moved, it was for opportunities that I didn't even know about. It kind of came to me that had me moving. Now, one of the things I want to stress is that your career is not yours. If you think about what President Nelson said in the last conference about let God prevail, if you really will believe that and make God the manager of your career, you'll have a career much greater than you can ever imagine. Okay? My wife likes to tease me and say, you know, when I married you, because I'd worked in grocery stores in high school and first couple of years of college, my aspiration was to be a grocery store manager because that's all I knew. That's all I could imagine doing. And there's a lot more that you can do. Okay, if you have any questions, again, either raise your hand, ask me, or Brandon, you got a question. You want to unmute and ask it? Okay, it's not letting him unmute. Go ahead. You want to type it out?
Everyone should have the ability to unmute, just so you know, students. So feel free to try and unmute if you can.
It says the host isn't allowing it.
Okay, well, let me see what's going on here. I'll play with it some more here. Sorry, everyone.
Let's see, Brandon, can we find you? Yeah, I'm not the host, so I can't unmute you. So unmute Brandon Nish. First thing, Alex.
Okay, see if I can find them.
Brandon with a B.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying to get in there. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's not giving me that option. That is so weird. Just unmute. Oh, did I do it? Here, I'm gonna. Oh, it looks like we're getting some questions here in the chat line as well.
Brandon asked, what is a sensible timeline for that change? Now, what kind of a change are you referring to, Brandon? Okay. How do you turn your career over to the Lord? Well, like I said, to me, my career started when the Lord sent me to the U. In fact, it probably started when he sent me to Japan and told me in my patriarchal blessing that he wanted me to work in foreign lands and diverse places, both serve it, and that was to serve him, not necessarily for a career. So what I found, I can tell you story after story where the Lord took over and things happened that I wasn't really expecting. But let me do something here. Are you still working on that, Alex?
Rob, I just made you host. See if you can be able to do that.
Hello?
Okay, Brandon's open. Okay, Brandon, do you want to ask a bit more?
You started answering it already. I was just wondering, how do you turn your career over to the Lord? And you answered, it usually starts as service, in the Lord's service. And then what is a sensible timeline for those career changes to happen? I was just kind of wondering.
Okay. One of the interesting things, like I said, I'm a bit of an anomaly nowadays, right? I worked for one company my whole career, which is really strange. And even when I was in my career, it had become a bit strange. And I had opportunities to leave Shell. But every time I did, and I would pray about it, the answer was stay. So my point would be is that you ought to be praying to the Lord right now to say, help me know what you want me to do. Help me to know what would be the right career for me to fit into the bigger picture of my life. One thing I tell people is I never went to the office saying, how much money can I make for Shell today? Every day I went to the office and said, how can I serve somebody today? Now, working for a company like I did, I mean, we were helping people all over the world in their most basic aspects of life. We're an energy provider. And that was the energy that took us from riding horses and walking to where we zip around town now in cars and vehicles, and we have air conditioning and lighting, and none of that existed before the energy revolution took place. And we're still in that, and it'll go on a lot longer. Okay? Anybody else?
Ivan has a question, I think.
Yeah, I have a question. My question is, brother, how do you usually recognize the promptings from the Spirit? You mentioned that you were prompted to switch or to transfer from BYU, which sounds to me more according to the Spirit, to the U, which is well known for not being like a religiously university. How do you recognize those promptings?
Well, it's interesting. Probably like a lot of you, right? I mean, you start to get ideas in your mind, and you start to have feelings in your heart. I'm a believer in what I call the D and C9 decisions. I often get thoughts and ideas and feelings. But what I find is the Lord expects me to do some work. And so I have to study those feelings out in my mind. I have to talk to people. I have to study things. I mean, I looked into the U. What does the U offer? What don't they offer? And like I said, at the end of the day, I actually gave up a lot to go to the U. But at the end of the day, I just felt like that's where I was supposed to go. And I would say a lot of that came from my mission, probably like many of you, right? I learned a lot on my mission about how to communicate with the Spirit. But having said that, I'll give you another example. I mean, Sister Carruth and I's mission at Ensign College ends in 5 months today. We don't ever ask, what do we want to do next? We always ask, what does the Lord want us to do next? And we've learned that he normally doesn't give us a lot of early lead time. So we have no idea what we're going to be doing in 5 months. But we've also learned that the answer will come when the answer needs to come. And so we just keep moving forward in faith, knowing that when the answer needs to be there, it'll be there. Okay? It's interesting. If you look at President Nelson, his very first talk as the prophet was about revelation. And one of the points he made is how willing the Lord is to give us revelation, to tell us what's true, tell us what we need to be doing, tell us what we need to be knowing. I read that talk on a regular basis because I'm still trying to learn how to really learn when the Lord talks to me. There's still times I kind of say, was that the Lord or was that me? But I just keep working at it and keep working at it. Okay? And so it's not like every time, bingo, I know exactly what the Lord wants me to do. But like I said, I get ideas and thoughts and feelings. And when I get those, I've learned to act on them. And I've learned to, go to the Lord and say, help me make sure I understand you correctly. Because the most important thing in my life is to do what you want me to do. And you're going to have to help me. Now, the other thing I'll mention to you, in my career, and I was at a very senior level in Shell. And most of the things I did is I worked on a lot of really cutting edge, major decisions, major strategic moves that Shell made. When I talked money, I talked in the billions. Okay? Because the decisions I was involved in making were in the $1 billion. And often those decisions had lives of 20, 30, 50 years. So they were always very high risk decisions. That was the world I lived in, high risk. And one of the things you learn is that the most important thing you can get to make a good decision is the right information. And if you listen to President Nelson, he talked about that. Good inspiration comes from good information. And I remember talking with very senior people in Shell and saying, you know, we would actually calculate how much are we willing to pay to get more information, to make a better decision, because we'd make it on better information. But I would always tell people, you know, one of the nice things about my personal life is that I can talk to the person in the universe who has perfect information. So before I actually make a decision and go down a path, I can know that I'm headed down the right road. Now, what I learned was it didn't mean the road was going to be easy. A lot of times the roads the Lord took me down were really hard. But as I told people, but I never had to look back and say, did I make the right decision? Because I knew I had. And I can assure you that is one of the most comforting feelings to have in your life, regardless of the challenges that come, is to know you're on the right path that the Lord wants you to be on. Okay?
It looks like Kessler has a question.
Yes, so far away.
Yeah, I was just curious. So basically, what type of education would an executive position in a company such as Royal Dutch Shell be looking for? Because I think I'm in a position right now where it's just like, for sure, I'm looking for a bachelor's degree, and I think I'm going to go bachelor's degree in business, just as an example, because I'm not sure specifically what I'm looking for, but I know that that's something that I definitely need. But as far as like continuing education and getting an MBA, just as you did, like, I guess what would you recommend for something like that?
Yeah. The Lord tells us, get all the education you can get. Now, again, my personal. I got a bachelor's degree in finance. I went from being on academic probation at BYU and graduating from the University of Utah with an honors bachelor's degree. And it's not because I was really smart. I'll tell you this, when I took my GMAT, I scored like in the 65th percentile, okay, which is not all that good. What I learned is that if I would work, I could learn things. Okay, I'm not natively smart, but if you would work hard, you can learn. Now, what's interesting about me is, so I'm a senior at the U. Like everybody else, I'm saying, well, should I get a bachelor's degree or should I go get my MBA? It was actually a time when it was economically poor times in the US. And so not a lot of people were getting jobs coming out of school with a bachelor's degree. But again, the Spirit said to me, you know, go get a job. I want you in the workforce. And like I said, the whole thing with Shell was not my doing. The Lord made that happen. So I went to work for Shell with a bachelor's degree. At that time, Shell was looking for a minimum 3.5 GPA. They wanted people who'd worked to put themselves through school. I mean, Shell was very much about, we don't want a 4.0 student. We want a person who did well academically, help pay for their education, and are really practical and well-grounded. In fact, it was interesting, our retail marketing people only had to have a 2.9 because there you have to be a schmoozer, right? You have to be able to talk to people. So we were more worried about people that were just friendly and go-getters and that kind of stuff than really being as smart as a lot of the other disciplines were. Okay, so I had the GPA. I had to put myself through school myself. Okay, my parents couldn't help me, and so those kind of things appealed to Shell. But coming out of that, I knew that I wanted to get all the education I needed professionally. And so, you know, I knew I wanted to get an MBA. I knew I wanted to get a professional certification. Didn't know what professional certification to get. But set a goal to myself that within 5 years, I would have those things. Okay. Ironically, in Shell at that time and still doesn't really differentiate a lot between a bachelor's and an MBA. okay? Because they were a believer that we bring you to work, we put you to work. What you learned in school was a vocabulary, but you didn't really learn how to do anything. And so they threw you into work. And that was an environment I thrived in, right? I mean, I knew how to work. And I put in the hours. Another thing that happened to me, interesting, and again, one thing when people ask me, how do you define a successful career? I tell them, there is no successful career except that you define yourself with your spouse if you're married and with the Lord. Okay? So as I was finishing up as a senior, one of the questions I had was, okay, so how am I going to balance my life? I'm married, I have one child, my wife's pregnant with number 2. I'm active in the church. I like being involved in the community. How do you manage that? The Lord told me, you've got 60 hours a week for your profession. Have at it. The rest of your time, you need to be doing everything else. And for me, that's faith, family, and community. Now, one of the things I learned to do, and again, I'm not bragging, don't think this is bragging, but I love my 2 hours of study from the mission. So I always have been studying 2 hours a day. I always exercise to stay in physical condition. I actually had to start getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to have 2 hours of study, 1 hour to get physical exercise, to get cleaned up so that I could be on the road at 6 o'clock, so that I could be home by 6 o'clock that night, so I could spend time with my family, my church callings, community activities. Okay. Now, again, my kids look at me and say, we can't do that. And I say, you don't have to. That was what I had to do. That was my life. That's what the Lord gave me to do, and he gave me the capacity to do that. Okay? I lived on 5 hours sleep a night for 36 years. My wife used to tell me, hey, I just read that if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to die a year younger than everybody else. And I said, that's okay. Because if you calculate those hours that I get every day, for all the years that I'm going to do that, and I still do it. I still get up at 3. I was up at 3 o'clock this morning. Okay, it's become the way I do things because I can do so much more with all that extra time. But that's me. Okay, none of my kids can do that. They've tried. and I know that none of my kids will have the career that I have had because it's not their career. They've got a whole variety of careers. None of them spend 60 hours a week professionally. But that's what the Lord told me he wanted me to do. And that's what I needed to do what he wanted me to do. Okay? So my message to you would be is counsel with the Lord in all your doings. Help the Lord help you decide what your career should be. And as I said, your career isn't just professional work. Your career is your life. Okay? Your career is your life. So define the life that you want. Define it with the Lord. Define it with your spouse when you become a triangle. And go for it. Like I said, most of my kids work 40 hours a week. They do well professionally, but they're never going to do anything like I did. But that's just a different life. Okay? So that would be my concern, my point to you. Other questions?
Good question.
I have a question.
Sure, fire away.
Yes. So this is actually something I've been pondering for quite some time is just how much involvement do you feel like you mentioned that the Lord has guided you in your career path, but how much of a plan do you think the Lord has for us in a specific career? Do you feel as though he's guiding us to the career that we know we best excel in and be the most happy with? And that's kind of been my question because the reason behind that is just, I want to know that what I'm going into is what's going to make me the happiest. And I know that the Lord knows what that is. And I'm just hoping that that's the direction that he's leading me. So I guess that's my question is how much does the Lord have in Do you believe he's guiding us to a specific career? Is my question.
I don't necessarily think he's guiding us to a specific career necessarily. In my case, I think he was. I think in my case, he wanted me to be working in foreign lands and diverse places. And so he put me to work for a company that could do that. Okay. What I do believe is that what God wants for us is just what we always talk about, right? He wants us to gain what we call eternal life. He wants us to become like him or like our Heavenly Mother, the most knowledgeable, powerful, wonderful person in the universe. That's what he wants us to become like. And he's given us a path, which we used to call straight and narrow, but now we call it covenant, which is kind of a generic path we all need to be on. But within that path, what I do believe is that he does customize our lives so that we will have the experiences that we need to become what we are capable of becoming, which is like him. Okay, so in my case, there's certain, I've got certain issues in my life, weaknesses, and he keeps throwing things at me to strengthen those weaknesses. At the same time, he keeps throwing things at me that play to my strengths, and I'm able to use those strengths. Okay, but I also found that he also tests us. And again, I'll share something with you. I don't share this to brag, because my career was not mine. In my career, I flew in corporate jets. I made lots of money. When I went places, I had a car and a driver, right? My time was so valuable that I didn't even drive myself around. I was picked up at my house in the morning. I was driven to every appointment during the day. I was driven home at night. If I had to go anywhere in the evenings, car and driver. Okay, my per hour cost is phenomenal. Everywhere I went, the red carpets rolled out. People kowtowed to me because I was a senior executive in one of the world's largest, most international companies. But I would tell my wife while that was going on, I would say, the Lord's testing me. He wants to see if I let this go to my head and I become somebody other than who I really am. And I won't say proud, but I'm pleased that when I retired and walked out the door and all that went away, I didn't miss it at all. And I still don't. Okay? If you saw the way my wife and I live, we live a very basic life. Nobody has any idea, if they don't know us, what our life has been like when I was working. Okay? My wife has flown corporate jets and, up front in the planes and everything else. She's flown all of that because that was the Lord. And like I said, to me, that was a test to see if I would let that go to my head and become somebody who I really wasn't and who I wasn't meant to be. Okay? Other questions?
How did you balance your professional life with your callings at church when you were being very busy at work?
Well, like I said, I basically worked from 6 in the morning till 6 at night. Whatever the calling the Lord gave me, I've been a bishop twice, a branch president once, a high councilman 5 times. I've generally always been busy in the church. One of the things I always tried to do is I tried to involve my family in my church callings. Okay. The other thing I tried to do is I would always attend what my kids would do. So if my kids had sporting events, when I lived in London, my son, who was going to high school in the American School of London in central London, he would travel for events. I would be sitting in the Netherlands watching him compete. And when he wasn't competing, he didn't want to talk to me, he wanted to talk to his friends. In between that, I'd be on the phone with somebody on the other side of the world. I'd be conducting business. I'd be doing meetings. I was able to have myself with all the gear I needed to be able to do business literally anywhere in the world. So I didn't have to be in an office. So I could literally be anywhere in the world my kids were, and I could be combining my professional life and my family life. So that's one thing I try to do is I didn't try to make it into compartments. I tried to blend it. I don't play golf because Saturdays was family day. Because generally on Sunday I was involved in church callings for a lot of hours. And so Saturday was our family day. And so we were together all day long on Saturdays. Okay? And so that's the trade-offs. But that's how I did it. So Saturday was family, Sunday was the Lord, and a couple of nights during the week. I always tried to be involved in the community somehow, even when I lived overseas, whenever I could. To do something in the community. And then obviously professionally. And for example, in the evening, when my kids got a little older, they'd be sitting in the family room doing their homework. I'd be sitting in the family room doing my homework. Okay? We just made it work. But I always tried to be there whenever they had something going on that was important to them. I had a son when I was living in Tokyo. Tokyo is about a 12-hour flight away. I had a son who was called into a bishopric in Houston, Texas. I flew to ordain him to be a high priest, got back on a plane the next day and flew 12 hours back to be back at the office Monday morning. Okay, and I did that for other things in my kid's life. So, I was in a position where I could do what I needed to do, but I would do that. Whenever my kids are doing something, I'm going to be there. Except when I'm serving a mission, then I'm precluded. Okay, so that's what I did. Like I said, to me, it was the chat with the Lord. It was over time, things got worked out. There were times I was disappointed that I thought I wanted something, it didn't turn out. And then I found out later that the Lord had something even better for me. And so I learned patience. I learned that I had to trust the Lord in his timetable and his plan for me. And I didn't know what his plan was most of the time. Okay? And so my message to you is to think really seriously about a couple things. And I'll share with you something. I'm a believer in vision. In Proverbs it says, if the people don't have a vision, they perish. Well, I turn that around. If you've got a vision, you'll flourish. And it's interesting that in the church we talk about vision. We see things, we can kind of foresee the future. There's also a very famous academic. His name's Jim Collins. I had a chance to actually spend some time with Jim when he was consulting with Shell. And he's a believer. His study is what makes a great company. And the very first thing that makes a great company is vision. And vision's made up of three things. It starts with your core beliefs and your core values. And everything else works around that. The second thing is your purpose. Why do you exist? You need to answer that question and have an answer. And third is your mission. So your vision should be something that you never actually achieve, or if you do, it's way out there in the future. Your mission is something that's maybe 3 to 10 years out. Okay, but those, and he calls those BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. Big meaning big, hairy meaning difficult, audacious meaning bold, goals. Something you're going to have to really work hard at for a long time. Well, guess what? When I look at that, I look at what does it take to become God? What does it take to gain eternal life? So if your vision is the vision that your Heavenly Father has for you, and you understand that, start thinking about what should you be doing in mortality to prepare for that. Okay? And that may be different things. Okay? Like I said, I've got good friends that were school teachers. Okay, school teachers don't make a lot of money. I know that because I've got a son who works at a university. He'll never make much money. He has opportunities to leave the university and go work in the business world. He could make 2 or 3 times as much money as he makes in academia. But he loves students, and he's great at it. I've gone and visited some of his students, and they rave about what he's like and what an influence he's had on their lives. And I just say, he's where he's supposed to be. Okay, he's pursuing the career that God has for him to pursue. And it's totally different than mine. Totally different than mine. Okay, other questions? Anything else?
I've got one last question.
Go ahead.
How do you know when something is perfectly not for you?
I don't know about anybody else, but I feel troubled when it's not right. I'll give you an example, a funny example. When I was working back in college at a grocery store, I was dating a girl at BYU. Holiday was on a Monday. I really wanted to take her out. I talked to my boss at the grocery store, and he said, okay, I'll give you Monday off if you work Sunday. And previously, my deal with him is when I don't work Sunday. And without thinking about it, I said, sure, I'll work Sunday so I can have Monday off. I walked away, and I had the worst feeling I've ever had in my life. I turned around, I walked back and said, no, I'll work Monday. And I found that's been true in my life. When I make a bad decision, and I try to make decisions where I have a little bit of space before they actually start happening, to give me that little bit of feel for the Spirit to respond. And I feel it. I feel it's not right. And again, I'm a believer in DNC 9. And I always talk about DNC 9 decisions. Study that in your own mind. Once you feel good about it, go to the Lord. If the Lord doesn't tell you no, keep going. But if it's the wrong decision, he'll let you know. Okay, he's not going to let you make a big, bad decision. As long as you're doing the right things in your life, to have the Spirit with you. So the most important thing you can do in your life is have the Spirit with you. And think about what that means, right? What does it mean to have God with you all the time? To walk through life knowing that right with you is God. And that you can access that. You can access perfect knowledge, all power, perfect characteristics. Okay? I don't get that in the business world. I never had that. I made some bad decisions. Okay? But I've never made a bad decision in my life that I did a DNC 9 around. You know, and I can testify to that. Okay, other questions?
Do you have any favorite books?
Favorite books? I read the scriptures all the time. and I read the words of the brethren. Okay? And I read business books, but I read business books about leadership. But what I've learned is that truth in any area you study is gospel truth. Okay? I just finished teaching early morning seminary for seniors in high school. And one of the lessons I teach is how to be happy. And I say, okay, what does the world teach you to do to be happy? What does Heavenly Father teach you to do to be happy? Interestingly enough, social science research supports what God tells us to do to be happy. It is not what our culture teaches us to be happy. Our culture is trying to sabotage our happiness. So read the books that will bring you in touch with the Spirit. And those don't have to be church books. Okay? I read books outside of church books when I feel like they will help me learn truth. Okay? So I'm a truth seeker. I'm a truth seeker in any field that I can get involved in. Because ultimately, we're going to have to know everything about everything. So if there's something that you're curious about, learn about it. I've got a granddaughter who calls me Mr. Research because every time we talk about something and she asks me a question, I say, well, I don't know a lot about that. Let's go look into it. Let's learn about that. Okay? Interestingly enough, I just finished reading a book by Jim Collins, who's the person who taught vision, values, and mission to the business world. Okay, it's on my bookshelf back here. It's the yellow one. I just finished reading that for Brent to put into a course. And it just reminded me how close business principles are to the gospel. Huh? The gospel leads, business follows, because business learns what's true and what makes things happen. Okay? Let me just say thank you very much for joining. Again, my message was stick with the Lord. If you stick with the Lord, you'll have a great career. It probably won't be the career I had because my career was for me and for the Lord and for my wife and my kids. My kids got a lot out of my career. Okay, got a lot of blessings out of the career I had. All righty.
Thank you
Great
so much.
talk,
for
Elder
sharing.
Carruth.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like I said,
Thank you.
hopefully I shared what the Lord wanted me to share with you. That's what I've been praying for.
Great job.
I appreciate it a lot. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Good luck with your careers. Like I said, if you stick with the Lord, you won't go astray.
Great advice.
Love you all very much.